Without further ado, Carly, I'm gonna hand it off to you.
Sounds great. So, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm camera averse this morning, so I'm going to be keeping my camera off. But I also find that's pretty easier when I'm presenting like this, so it's not a distraction for everyone. So, I'm Carly Osborne, the Education Awareness Specialist with the Washington State EAP. And today we are talking about emotional intelligence. We're going to aim for about an hour together. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat box or save them to the end and we can come off of mute and talk about them. But we're going to go ahead and get started so that we are respectful of everyone's time. Just a few quick things about why we are here today. So, our goals, we are going to define and kind of give an overview or practice of the following concepts, which are important to emotional intelligence. Those are self management, self awareness, self regulation, self motivation, and the big one, empathy. We want to learn how to understand and manage our emotions effectively. We also want to be able to really understand how we communicate both verbally and non-verbally using emotional intelligence. And then kind of really hone in on identifying the benefits of emotional intelligence in our workplaces. We've all had kind of some shifts in how we work and where we work over the past few years. So we'll also focus a little bit on what it means for those of us who still work virtually or even in hybrid work situations. So let's start by talking about what emotional intelligence is. Great quote there that Wayne Payne, love that name, by the way, really kind of was the person who really drove the concept of emotional intelligence. And really, what he kind of figured out is that um, developing emotional intelligence was really about expanding our self awareness. That it really involved being aware of who we are and our emotions and how we relay them to other people. So it's really about using our emotions constructively. But if we really wanted to kind of define it, emotional intelligence is the ability to recognize, understand, and manage our emotions while influencing the emotions of others. Not necessarily that we're controlling the emotion of others, but that by using our emotions to control the way we interact with other people, that we also can influence the way they react. We often see this a lot when working with other people, that if we're in a heightened state of emotion and we start getting angry or really animated, that they usually respond in kind. So it's really kind of that give and take of how we respond to each other. So as we're kind of thinking through this and really working toward it, I want to ask everybody to just kind of take a pause here and think about a time when you felt reactive. So when you're thinking about a time where you've had a conversation with someone and maybe without even meaning to, you felt yourself getting defensive and reactive to what they were saying. Kind of think of how you felt in that moment. Did you feel as though you had control of your emotions or maybe the thoughts in your head? How were you feeling in that moment? And while you're thinking about that, go ahead and take two big deep breaths for me and then think about how you responded. Were you able to, calm yourself? Were you able to stop and think, okay, I don't want to respond this way? Or did you just let go? And kind of keep that in your head because how you responded to it kind of shows where your emotional intelligence was in that moment. And if you're someone who was able to take a moment and step back, you probably have a pretty good level of self awareness. And if you're someone like me who took a little bit more time to learn it, you probably said a few things you might have regretted later, and that's okay. It's one of the reasons why we're here today. But I want you to think of that because that ability to take that step back shows our emotional intelligence. So what we're going to do is we're going to jump forward here to some self-management as to discuss as our first step of our journey here in learning about self-management. So self-management is a concept that basically says we are able to control our impulsive feelings and behaviors, that we can learn to stay focused and follow through on commitments. And that was actually written in Daniel Goleman's defining work of working with emotional intelligence. Daniel Goleman is another person who's really well known in the field of emotional intelligence. You hear his name quite a bit. His work is really good if you ever get a chance to look him up. But what we notice is that with self-management, it allows us to have very defined steps for what that means. Is that in addition to just controlling the emotions, it allows us to stay productive and consistent even when our emotions run high. It means that we also see longer term effects, like we're able to reduce stress and build resistance. And that this can also help us lead to better decision making, healthier relationships, and even greater success in our careers. And we can accomplish this through a couple of different ways, which I will go ahead and share with us now. So let's look at this in terms of starting out with what does it mean to be consistent with self-management? So, self management in terms of emotional intelligence means that we know how to stick to our values and principles. Consistency helps us build trust and stability in how we manage our emotions at work. And that seems kind of weird when we say sticking to our values and principles, but many of us have those in our workplaces. We know, the things that drive us, the things that bring us to our workplaces every day, and we're able to find our purpose in our work. And usually our purpose, especially those of us who are working in things like higher education, in medicine, in those careers that really have us helping and assisting other people, one of our purposes is just that. I want to help other people. I want to be there to guide them, to help them, to show them the way. And so those values and goals and core principles are usually, well, I want to be kind and I want to be helpful and I want to teach people. So how do we do that? We do that through, not yelling. We do that through providing examples. We do that by providing, everything we can in our power to be, examples in our workplace and lead by example. So we provide consistency. We also can provide self-management through the creation of setting clear goals for ourselves. So things like not allowing ourselves to become overwhelmed by large tasks, being able to break things down into manageable goals. So things like, taking those larger tasks of our day and breaking them down, because a big source of losing sense of self-management and control is feeling overwhelmed. So learning how to do things like break those bigger tasks down into smaller ones so that we maintain focus and reduce that feeling of being overwhelmed. Another key component of self-management is taking responsibility, so self-accountability. If something doesn't go as planned, we learn how to adjust and move forward without self-criticism. That's also a key component of self-compassion, which is something that we should all be learning, especially now as we're entering a very stressful time of the year. And if you're not familiar with self-compassion, I do highly suggest looking up Dr. Kristen Neff. Her work on self-compassion is fantastic. We also have to learn to practice flexibility because, well, things don't go as we plan. We can plan for every contingency in the world and something new will go our way. But self-management requires that we practice flexibility because it's crucial for us to learn how to stay calm under pressure and manage change. Self-management also requires us to learn to take care of our well-being, and that includes physical and emotional well-being, such as regular exercise, proper sleep, and mindfulness techniques. We're going to talk about mindfulness a little bit later. We also have to develop emotional awareness. What this means is regularly checking in with our emotions. By recognizing how we're feeling in a moment, we can prevent impulsive reaction and make more thoughtful decisions. A quick kind of story to share with you about how being unaware of your emotional awareness can kind of backfire on you. During a period of high stress in a prior career, in a very emotionally vulnerable moment where I had no self-management, I wrote a very long, very nasty email, and I knew better. I really did. And people tried to talk me out of it, but I still wound up sending it to my entire organization, everybody I worked with, our admin, our board of trustees. I sent it to everybody. We're talking close to 1,000 people because I was so angry and so burnt out and so tired. Had I had more self-management and been more aware of how I was feeling emotionally, I might not have sent that email. But again, I was not checking in with myself. I couldn't recognize how I was feeling, and I was just so blinded by everything that was going on that I acted impulsively. So I was reactive rather than proactive. Thankfully, it just, required a meeting with HR and some talking to. Didn't get in a lot of trouble, but still, impulsivity can lead us to do some things that can make some career altering decisions for us. Self-management also does require us to have some ability to prioritize time management. Efficiently managing our time is a crucial part of self-management, because by prioritizing tasks and managing deadlines, you reduce stress and avoid becoming overwhelmed. So using things like time blocking techniques to stay focused and avoid burnout. So with skill building, we're just doing what we have to, or I'm sorry, self-management, we're doing what we have to learn, who we are, to become more self-aware. We can do these through daily self exercises. I do apologize that I'm stumbling over my words here today. This is a new to me presentation. Do this through management. So something like taking a moment to do a mindful pause. So, kind of as we did a moment ago, we can stop for a moment to assess how we're feeling before we respond to a stressful moment. So, in my case, if I had taken a moment to just stop and think, how am I feeling? Well, I'm angry. I'm hurt by what was said. Whatever we're feeling, by examining that emotion, we can then decide how we're going to respond. Well, I'm not going to write that email. Or in this moment, I'm sad. I'm going to take myself away from the situation. Or I'm angry and I can't formulate the thought that I want to say. And what I will say might not be received properly. So it's taking that moment to reflect on how you're feeling and assess the situation before you're responding. In addition to self-management, we have self-awareness. And I really love this image because I think it's helpful to think that we might be feeling small on the outside, like our lovely little kitten there, but on the inside, we're probably a lot bigger and braver than we think we are. And self-awareness involves recognizing your own emotional responses and how they impact your work and relationships. And this also goes a long way in helping to improve decision-making and workplace interactions. This also means that we learn how emotions affect our performance, and also helps us understand our own strengths and limitations. And I'm so sorry, that should not have jumped like that. And what this is this is built upon the work of Tasha Eurich. She did a lot of research on self-awareness, and its research on and its research and impact on leadership, which was truly amazing. So what we find with this is that people who have taken the time to develop self-awareness really seem to know who they are. They are able to assess, their emotional reactions. They are able to assess how they are approaching other people. We talk a lot about reactive versus proactive. These are usually the people who can stop and think a moment. They know when they're just not in the right place. And the way we can develop self-awareness again is by taking those moments to stop and ask ourselves, who am I? What am I doing? Why am I thinking this way? And am I reacting in a positive manner? Another wonderful way to start developing that self-awareness, because this is not a skill that can be learned in an afternoon or even in an hour, but something that requires taking those very small steps and building upon it. A great way to start learning self-awareness is that we can start by writing our emotions down at the start and the end of the day for a week, and then reflect on what causes these emotions and how they affect our work. So really simply, on a Monday, this morning, write down the three emotions that you're feeling at the start of your day, and then the three that you feel at the end of the day, and do that throughout the rest of your work week. And then at the end of the week, when you have time, sit down and reflect on, why was I feeling this way at that time? And how did this affect me at work? Or if you have the ability, you can even reflect, halfway through the day. So maybe you get to your lunchtime, you reflect on how you're feeling in that morning. This reflection allows you to start realizing, what's affecting the way that you're feeling. So if you're waking up grumpy in the morning and you look back and say, oh, well, Thursday night after I got home from work, I was stressed out, and I was stressed out because, well, my team isn't doing what's asked of them. We're starting to identify some key problems that are in our lives. And again, starts bringing out that level of self-awareness. And as we build on that, we can start incorporating other tools to help us start bringing in our self-awareness. Empathy. And I'm going to spend a little bit more time on empathy than I have the other ones, because empathy is a really, really crucial part of building trust and rapport, not only in teams, but in personal relationships. And empathy is something that is often lost in emotional intelligence. We often also confuse empathy with sympathy. And when we have that confusion and we lose sight of empathy, all of our emotional intelligence can kind of be thrown out the window. So, for anyone who is not 100% certain what empathy is the ability to understand the emotions of others. What that means is that we can look at someone and we can put ourselves in their shoes and respond in a way that addresses their emotional needs. Um, Empathy strengthens personal relationships by fostering understanding and reducing conflict. In our careers, especially with leadership, empathy helps build trust and loyalty. It makes teams feel supported and valued. And in remote work, it can help maintain strong connections despite lack of face-to-face interaction. Virtual teams that practice empathy are more cohesive and productive. So with empathy, because again, with sympathy, we also kind of think, well, I'm putting myself in the other person's shoes. But typically what happens with sympathy is we try to form a connection with that other person by relaying our shared experiences. So if someone says, I'm dealing with this thing, I lost someone close to me, I'm dealing with a financial issue, whatever that thing is, we try to relate and tell them, oh, I completely understand what you're going through because, well, I had the same thing happen and we share our story. And there's nothing wrong with that, truthfully. There's nothing wrong with being sympathetic to people. But sometimes when we do that, we lose sight of what we're trying to do. This person is reaching out to us, for that comfort, that support, whatever it is that they need. And by sympathizing, we can lose that message. With empathy, we see the story from their perspective. They have lost something. They need something from us. So we say it's saying something like, I can see how this is really hard for you. How can I help? What do you need me to do? What is it that you need from me in this moment? So again, it's that level of self-awareness and recognizing that this isn't necessarily about me, but as a human being who has similar experiences, I understand what they're going through. And I remember how people helped me in this moment. So how can I help them in this moment? So it's kind of a key difference is that we're not bonding and trying to share through the lived experience. We're recognizing the similarity in shared experiences, but recognizing that we're focusing on them. So hopefully that definition makes some sense. Again, they're very, very similar. But they can get really confusing and kind of muddled, especially if you tend to be a helper type personality who wants to bond and build those relationships with people. We tend to do it through shared experiences. But we want to focus on the empathy, being able to put ourselves in their shoes and offer help from their perspective. So one thing we can do, and we're actually going to do a couple of things here with empathy. What we're going to do is we are going to look at a practice called empathy mapping. So as we get through this, what I would like for you to do is just think on a challenging conversation. I don't want you to think on anything that might be too difficult, that might cause you any emotional distress or any mental distress, just something challenging. It could be something simple as if you have a younger person in your life who's maybe dealing with some of those changes that we have all experienced, elementary school to middle school to high school, whatever. It doesn't have to be anything incredibly deep, just something that you might have shared in common with this person. Just kind of think on that conversation and reflect on how that other person might have been feeling. So just think of a conversation that was challenging, but only think of what that other person might have been thinking and feeling. So what we're going to do is we are going to do an exercise for empathy mapping. Empathy mapping is a tool that can be used both in personal and professional lives. It's also a tool that can be used in the moment and as a reflective exercise, and depending on the purpose and the situation. But here's what a breakdown would look like. If we were using this in the moment, it would be a thought process, of course. So in the moment, the purpose of it would be when you're in a live conversation or meeting and want to quickly understand the other person's perspective. This would help you respond empathetically in real time. And so to use it as you're interacting, you would pay attention to what the person is saying, their body language and their emotions that you're picking up on. So, we often feel from the other person, you often say, well, I could feel them radiating with anger, or I could just feel the sadness dripping off of them. We feel those, we pick up on those nonverbal cues. Um, Mentally note this, what they say and what they do. So what are they saying? Well, I'm saying I'm, dealing with this thing. What are they doing? They're standing apart from me. They're holding themselves in. There's something that they're doing with their body. And then from that, infer what they might actually be thinking or feeling based on what you are seeing and hearing. So, for example, if someone is sighing and saying, it's just really busy right now, you might infer that they're feeling overwhelmed and think, I can't manage everything. So, you're with your person and they sigh heavily and give you one or two word answers. I'm good. It's okay. All's well. In that moment, you might empathize by considering that they might feel overwhelmed, disengaged, confused, and you might offer support or check in with them and just say, hey, I'm here for you. What can I do for you? So I'm sure that's something that we all do almost reflexively when we are working, when we're with people who are feeling something. As a reflective exercise, empathy mapping can work to help us work through past interactions that might not have gone as well, or to help us continue improving our self-awareness. So it allows us to gain deeper insight and plan a more thoughtful response. This helps us understand and prepare us for future interactions. So after a conversation or meeting, we can sit down and fill in each quadrant of an empathy map. And I do have an example of an empathy map. At the end of this presentation, I will make sure to send Sebastian the PDF of this so that he can share it out with anyone who's in our presentation today. And what we do is we think about what the person said and did and try to deduct what they might have been thinking and feeling. This allows us to approach similar situations with more empathy in the future. So again, thinking about that difficult conversation, we reflect and use the empathy map to understand their perspective. We might realize that they felt stressed and unsupported, leading you to schedule a follow-up conversation to discuss what's going on and offer help. So maybe in that moment, we didn't realize what was going on, but we sit down, we use this empathy map, and we go, oh, I should follow up with that person and make sure they're okay. And there are key differences for when we might use this map. So in the moment is probably the most effective for when we need to develop quick, empathetic responses during active conversations, especially when we're dealing with conflict or strong emotions. And reflective mapping allows us to have deeper insights after interactions. So definitely something to use later on when maybe we have some more time to think about it, or we feel the conversation didn't go well. So again, I will have a copy of what an example of what an empathy map is, along with the with the instructions for you at the end of this presentation, so that you can go ahead and look over it and practice it if you would like. So again, just an example of what it might look like, what they say, what they might be thinking, what they feel, and what they might be doing, and then how you might respond. So we were kind of covering empathy. And again, I want to be respectful of everyone's time and make sure we get through everything. So let's look at some self-regulation. Self-regulation is the ability to manage emotions in stressful situations. This emphasizes the balance between expressing emotions while maintaining professionalism. I don't know about you, but sometimes this can be very, very hard to do, especially if you have been doing something all day long and you're at the end of the day and you're just like, I can't people anymore. So self-regulation is about making sure that we're still managing our emotions under pressure so that we're avoiding those reactive behaviors. So it doesn't mean that we're suppressing our emotions. It means that we're controlling how we express them in healthy and productive ways. So those with strong self-regulation are less likely to say or do something they'll regret in the heat of the moment. When we are looking at self-regulation in terms of personal living, we see that we can navigate challenges without letting emotions take control. And this leads to better decision making in relationships and personal well-being. And in our career, it means we don't send emails to everyone when we shouldn't send them. But more realistically, it also means that it helps us maintain that professionalism even when under pressure. And if we're leaders here today, it means that we're better able to create a calm and stable work environment, which fosters trust and respect within teams. And if you're joining us tomorrow for psychological safety, you will see that that comes up quite a bit. So what we want is we want to be able to express our emotions at work in a healthy way without suppressing them. So it doesn't mean we never say things like, I'm upset, I'm angry, I don't feel you're listening to me. It means that we work on creating environments where people in our teams, in our departments, whatever your work setup looks like, where we are comfortable saying so. A key component of that, of course, is always trust. And again, if you're joining me tomorrow for psychological safety, we'll discuss that a lot. But that's really what we need to have is we need to have that shared respect in teams where we're free to share freely without fear of reprisal or disciplinary action. But sometimes we don't have that. So we do have to kind of push the feeling aside to get through what we are dealing with so that we can have that moment later and let it out. So again, we go back to our self-awareness and we learn and rely on tips like taking that deep breath, counting down from 10, or even learning to say things like, this is not a good time for me to reply to this. Or in a meeting, being able to say something like, I need to step away for a moment to think about this. So pausing and reflecting is really wonderful. If you are a leader here with us today, one great thing that I have found and that we have used personally is being able to say at the start of a team meeting that, we're going to have a tough discussion. If things get too much and you feel yourself having a reaction, be it anger, sadness, whatever, and you need a moment, please feel free to get up and walk out of the room. There's no reason to stay for this. We understand that you need to leave. We're all adults. We can handle it. Allowing people the freedom that they need to step away to work through whatever they're feeling and come back. Self-regulation is highly important. It is a tool that we will all, we can actively continue learning. Some days we'll be better at it than others, but self-regulation is highly important. Communication, very, very basic, something that we often kind of forget about. Effective verbal communication involves both listening and speaking with emotional intelligence. That means, of course, we go back to our empathy and clarity when responding. Strong verbal communication involves active listening. So we're actually hearing what people are saying. We are also responding thoughtfully rather than reacting impulsively. So that can active listening can involve things like rephrasing or reframing what people are saying. So yes, I hear what you're saying. So what I think you're saying is, and then repeating back to them. Parroting is what we used to call it, soliciting more information. So I hear you saying this. Can you clarify more? Active listening and active thoughtful responses and questioning. And so I think most of us are really, really, really good at responding verbally in our workplaces. We've had the experience, we kind of know how. But what I have noticed, though, is nonverbal communication has become kind of different, especially because we now live and work in environments where we spend a great deal of time in environments like this. And it used to be, when you're standing in front of someone, you can typically read their body language, crossed arms, usually means they're a little closed off, roll your eyes. People know you're probably being a little sarcastic. We've gotten really good at that. But now with things like computers, like today, my camera screen is off. You have no idea what my body is saying to you. I could be rolling my eyes. I could be spinning in a chair. You don't know. So we really have to start focusing on nonverbal cues like body language, facial expressions, but even more important, we need to start listening to things like tone of voice. So how are people talking, the inflections in what we're speaking? Are they saying it sarcastically? Are they, when they say, oh, that's great versus, oh, that's great, listening to the changes in our tone and how we are talking. Excuse me. In the workplace, emotionally intelligent communication is vitally important because it leads to clearer expectations, stronger collaboration, and fewer conflicts. And it can also help inspire and motivate their teams more effectively. And it's hard. I don't have all the answers for the shift in communication as we move from, as we interact and interchange between in person and online. But what I can say is that as we navigate newer workplaces where we spend more time online, that this comes back to, again, that ability to be self-aware and to ask questions like, may I have some clarification on, or we're not in the same room and I want to make sure I understand that what you're saying is this. So we have to remember, when we're in person, body language is so much more telling than verbal language, and that when we're in a virtual workplace, that words are a lot more telling. The verbal speaking is a lot more important than body language. So we have to learn to be able to switch between the two to be able to read the person that we are with. And my practical tip for this is to practice it a lot, especially in virtual teams, learning to speak up and say, I want to make sure that I'm understanding this correctly since I can't see you. That's really, really very helpful. But I also want to make sure that we touch on speaking about emotions. Because we have empathy as a cornerstone. If we think of emotional intelligence as a square with 4 stones, we know that self-management is one of them. We know that empathy is another, and then we have managing emotions. It's the ability to regulate emotions that allows us to remain focused and productive even when we're under stress. Of course, the first step is recognizing what we're feeling and naming our emotions. Without recognition, emotions can take control. Once we recognize emotions, we learn to take a moment to pause and breathe. This creates a necessary gap between emotion and reaction. We also go back to our self-management techniques. So using things like mindfulness, learning how to do things like reframing our situations. Cognitive reframing allows us to see the situation from that different perspective, or as we called it earlier, empathy. Learning how to constructively respond to people based on reflection and understanding leads to emotional regulation, which leads to better decisions. And then reflecting on outcomes. So it is a 7-step, 6-step trip scale to emotional regulation. And it is actually something that we can actively practice by these bullet points. So recognizing, name our emotions to clarify the situation. In the moment, there's always that moment where we can stop and think, what am I feeling right now? I'm happy, I'm sad, I'm angry, I'm confused, I don't know what's going on, I don't want to be here. What is that emotion? Give it a name. When we give something a name, we're more likely to recognize it and respond accordingly. Once we've named it, give it a pause and think about how we want to pursue. Okay, I'm angry. I'm going to give myself that moment to think, I'm not okay to do this, and I'm going to move forward from it. We can also, afterwards or even during it, consider reframing it. What can I learn from this? Well, whatever that looks like for you, I can move forward with the anger and probably learn my HR person's first name. Or if I reframe it, I can, learn how to suppress that anger for now and deal with it more constructively later. We can also then make the choice that is best for us in that moment. And then after, we can always respond. We take the time to reflect and work on what worked for us, what didn't. What can we improve? What can we do next time? Use it as a learning experience. And again, it sounds very clinical, very formulated, step-by-step thing, but sometimes it helps to have this reminder that we can do these little things that can help us through. And I do see something in the chat, so if you bear with me. Oh, thank you. Yes, I loved the flow chart too. I thought it was really important. So the flow chart is really great. It does help just having that kind of in your mind. If you're someone like me who needs a visual reminder that gets stuck in your head and you think, recognize, pause, use, reframe, choose, reflect. It is very, very helpful. It allows for that deeper thinking. So just something there to have with you to kind of remind yourself, I've got this. And again, it always comes back to that self-management and that self-awareness. We talk a lot about, the flow chart for emotional regulation. Some of the techniques that we can use with emotional regulation, deep breathing. There's so much to be said for breathing. I read a paper a few months ago when I was working on some mindfulness meditation series where it said something like we breathe, it was either 17,000 or 170,000 times a day unconsciously. It's not something we're aware of. It's an automatic response. We just do it. However, research shows that when we take the time to intentionally breathe, meaning that we actually pause and take that time to take that big deep breath in and let the deep breath out, and that we're taking that time to intentionally breathe, that we are actually improving our well-being, that we are intentionally calming our nervous systems, that we are giving ourselves space and time and a moment to be present. So there is a lot to be said for deep breathing. It's also something that doesn't cost money. It doesn't take a lot of time. It doesn't interrupt your day. And it doesn't have to be something that draws attention to yourself. So an emotional regulation technique, especially if you're in a situation where your emotional intelligence is not at its strongest, you can just take that moment and hold it for a second and let it out. Just doing that once or twice, you can automatically feel your stress levels coming down, your body calming down, because we're trying to stop your vagus nerve from sending out the signals that you're in danger. We're stopping that fight, flight, or freeze response. And I love the little snowflake because all you do is you breathe out and then breathe in and you just follow the snowflake. There's also progressive muscle relaxation. Again, these are all little techniques that you can do really without other people noticing that can help you in that moment to regain your sense of balance, that sense of self-awareness, and allow you to refocus on emotional intelligence. Progressive muscle relaxation is exactly what it sounds like. You can actually sit in a chair during a meeting and do this, tense your muscles, and then slowly relax them. You can start at your feet, move up completely through your body. Some people just do it with their hands or their shoulders. Some just focus on lower body, squeeze, and you let go. You move up to another muscle and you squeeze and let go. And again, you're focusing on specific muscle groups. You're focusing the stress there. You're pulling it in and then you're letting it go. Meditation, people think, requires a ton of time where you have to sit in a very complicated pose and have music playing and breathe, super deeply. Breathing is very important in meditation, and you have to om. You don't have to. Meditation doesn't require a ton of time. You can do a meditation in a moment, just sitting there, simply closing your eyes and just breathing and not thinking about anything. And that could be a meditation, just letting your eyes closed, just being quiet and letting your head be empty. Or just thinking, moving on, we'll skip a cognitive reframing, go straight to visualization. You can do a mindful meditation, visualization exercise at the same time. Really quickly, I don't want to be angry. I'm going to visualize myself. I'm going to get through this meeting. It's going to be wonderful. And you're thinking this to yourself and you're visualizing yourself having this conversation where it's not stressful and it's not angry. Everything's great. A minute. That's all you need. You're breathing, you're thinking, you're calming, you're much more in control of your emotions, you're more in control of your thoughts, you're aware of yourself and what you want to do, and you're going forward with purpose. You're in control of your emotional intelligence. Cognitive reframing. Raise your hand to yourself if you're like me and tend to catastrophize or do that all or nothing thinking of this is all going to go terribly. I laughed because my son was walking by as I said that and he raised his hand. This is all going to go terribly. This meeting is awful. Everything's going to fall apart. And I just know I'm not going to be able to keep my temper in control. If you're like that, cognitive reframing has been proven by science to help with that by simply saying things like, yes, it could go wrong, but what if it didn't? Yes, this meeting might be tense, but it could be for a good reason. Or this might not go wrong. This could be absolutely great. Taking that thought and kind of putting a spin on it. It's also an act of optimism, because optimists are not happy all the time. These are the people who recognize that, yeah, things can go wrong, but there's still good out there too. So putting that cognitive reframing on it. Yeah, it might go sideways, but this could be really, really great for us. It doesn't always work and you will slip up, but it can be incredibly helpful. And then emotional labeling. Again, we're giving a name to our emotion, like putting it on your forehead. I'm angry, I'm sad, I'm mad. And it's okay to tell people, hey, I'm actually really kind of mad right now, and this is not the best time to have a conversation. All of these techniques, like I said, are meant to help us acknowledge what's going on inside our body, calm that vagus nerve, shut down our autonomic nervous system, turn off our fight, flight, or freeze response, and get us back under control so that we can put ourselves in that empathetic response, to put ourselves where we're paying attention to what people are saying, how they're saying it with their bodies, and being able to have those productive conversations using emotional intelligence. So, emotional intelligence, believe it or not, if I haven't already said this, fosters better teamwork and conflict resolution. Leaders with strong EI create psychologically safe environments, because I haven't already mentioned that. But what we also want is that there is a sense of social responsibility, social management and responsibility that comes with emotional intelligence. So social management is about using emotional intelligence to navigate social situations and build strong, positive relationships. It involves being aware of not only your own emotions, but also the emotions of those around you. People with strong social management skills can influence, inspire, and connect with others effectively. They know how to build trust, resolve conflict, and create a collaborative environment. So what this is there's some key components of social management, which include effective communication. And emotionally intelligent communication is clear, empathetic, and responsive. Again, we're aware of that emotional context of conversations, and we learn how to adjust our tone and language accordingly. So we're practicing that we're practicing that active listening, where we listen to understand rather than to respond. I once took a training a very long time ago, and this can be effective with teams when you're training. Groups of 3 people, 2 people had a conversation. The third person was just there to listen. And what they would do is one person would talk, they would pay attention to what the other person was talking about. And when it was time for the other person who was participating in the conversation to speak, and it was time for them to respond, so they would tap them on the leg. So if they thought that the other person was not actively listening and they were missing those cues to respond appropriately, they would just tap them on the leg. So they were teaching them how to respond to active listening instead of just nodding along and going, They actually were learning and teaching through physical touch how to respond through active listening. It was really interesting training. I could actually probably find the book it came from if I searched hard enough. So it involves nodding, maintaining eye contact, and reflecting back what was said. It also allows for conflict resolution, because individuals who are emotionally intelligent are empathetic, not sympathetic, and they use self-regulation to address conflicts constructively. When we focus on finding common ground and working towards a solution that satisfies everyone involved. Solution, not a definite outcome. Sometimes there is no outcome that makes everyone happy, but we can usually find something where we walk away all at least reasonably okay with what happened. We also find that with social management, we find influence and persuasion is more easily navigated, because influence isn't just about convincing others to agree with you. It's about building rapport and inspiring others to share your vision. So we have to think about that. When we think about understanding what motivates others, we are better able to connect with them on a deeper level and inspire them to take action. This is especially helpful in our workplaces when we're typically moving toward a common goal with each other. So if we are able to be empathetic, relate to them as they are, we can have that positive influence that we can continue moving toward that same goal. It also does allow for us to build and maintain trust because, again, that last little cornerstone is trust. If we don't have trust in our relationships, such as following through on promises, being transparent about decisions, and recognizing contributions of others, we do not have happy workplaces. We do not have happy personal and professional relationships. So social management is a huge part of that. Again, because it's empowering us to improve relations by fostering empathy, trust, open dialogue. It's empowering us to do things like navigate social dynamics more effectively so that we have stronger connections with family and friends. And professionally, it allows us to improve our teamwork and improves employee engagement. It improves our leadership effectiveness. And it really improves that psychologically safe environment that I cannot stop talking about enough. So, how we do this is through empathetic communication. We ask open-ended questions. We show genuine interest. Pay attention to it allows us to help manage group dynamics through paying attention to the mood of the group and using our emotional intelligence to steer interactions in a positive direction. One great example of that is if we notice that everyone in the room is getting really, really upset and kind of conversations aren't going well, it might be a good idea to end the meeting instead of continue on. Might also give us the chance to recognize those who are more quiet, who might not speak up, and give them an opportunity to participate as well. It also allows us the ability to recognize that emotionally intelligent conversations allow us to provide better feedback that is more constructive and focused on growth rather than those negative types of feedback that we are used to receiving. So social management is a huge part of it as well. And then we have emotional intelligence in virtual or hybrid work. Again, like 5 years ago, we probably wouldn't even be talking about this, but my job is mostly remote, occasionally in person. I'm sure some of you are the same way. So in remote or hybrid work environments, EI is essential for maintaining clear communication and team cohesion. So all of the biggest thing I can do with this, because it is still something that is evolving, is to offer practical tips for how we can build emotional connections in virtual settings. So it's things like making sure that when we are having virtual meetings, that we are doing things like making sure that we are focusing on intentional communication and empathy. So things like making sure that we are recognizing that people are not feeling isolated or that we're not feeling stressed to the remote work environment, making sure that we are having actual check-ins with the people who are remote and occasionally forcing them to turn their cameras on. I do occasionally turn mine on. We also have to do things like, making sure that we are self-aware enough to sense when our remote teammates are kind of pulling away, when maybe they're skipping meetings or we've noticed that there's no activity online for a while. When we practice empathy, we are also better able to understand the unique challenges of remote workers and take better action at making them feel included. Remote work can also very often blur the boundaries between personal and professional lives. Very, very true. Not to discount the blurring of professional and personal lives for those who work fully in person, because that also happens. So we all are stressed and going to burnout, but people who have strong emotional regulation are better equipped to manage that type of blurring when they work from home. So again, making sure that you are working on that self-management so that you are having that balance that you need. So we want to make sure that when we are working remotely, that we are regularly checking in with colleagues about how we are doing emotionally, not just professionally. And it doesn't have to be with everyone on the team. Find that support person that works best for you. Even if it's just a colleague, you check in and be like, hey, I'm cool. Make sure we're using video calls to read those nonverbal cues so that we know that they're crucial to understanding emotion. And encourage remote employees to set clear boundaries. We also want to make sure that we want to make sure that we understand that remote teams often struggle with communication, isolation, and disengagement, and that we really want to promote high levels of emotional intelligence to mitigate those challenges. So really make sure that we are focusing on things like emotional awareness, emotional resilience, and self-awareness with that. So again, emotional intelligence, virtual work is still kind of an emerging field. There's not a whole ton of current research that I found on it, but I want to make us aware that it's something that we are focusing on. And as we continue to work in this type of environment, that we have to be aware that there are unique challenges when we are working remotely to emotional intelligence, because there is a level of separation between us and other people, mainly our computer screens. So we have to make sure that we are still practicing and maintaining our emotional intelligence skills, and that we're aware of how they might be different and how they might be affecting us when we are working remotely. So one more important topic to discover is that emotional intelligence helps leaders, and this does not mean always managers, supervisors, HR. A leader in this context can be anybody, can help make balanced, informed decisions by managing emotions and considering other people's perspectives. So what we have here is we have another flow chart, because I like flow charts. What we have here is we've got a flow chart. Oh, it did it do it? There it is. Okay. It didn't show up on my screen. What we have here is a little bit of a decision-making process incorporating emotional intelligence, starting with recognize and understand your own emotions. So we begin by acknowledging your current emotional state, identify any emotions that may influence your decision. So stress, excitement, fear. Pause and reflect, taking a moment to pause before acting. This helps prevent impulsive decisions driven by strong emotions, especially important for our leaders in the workplace. If we have a leader who is impulsive, that can lead to some really interesting decisions. Gather information, collect all relevant data and facts about the situation. Ensure you have a comprehensive understanding before proceeding. Consider other people's perspectives. Empathy. Think about how the decision will impact others. Put yourself in their shoes to understand their feelings and needs. Evaluate options emotionally and logically. List possible options and outcomes. Assess each option using both logical analysis and emotional considerations. Alignment, so align with values and goals. Ensure the decision aligns with personal and organizational values. Consider long-term goals and ethical implications. Make the decision. Choose the option that best balances emotional insights and logical reasoning. Commit confidently to your choice. Communicate effectively in big changes, especially, when we're talking changes in our work environment. Communication is often where it breaks down. So making sure we share our decisions with stakeholders clearly and empathetically, and being open to feedback and questions. Reflect on the outcome. After implementing the decision, reflect on its impact, learn from the experience to improve future decision making. So that leads us back to recognize. So again, another visual flow chart, because it always helps just kind of have those ideas of how we can make a decision with emotional intelligence. And this can work whether it's personal, professional, whether you are a supervisor, manager, executive leadership, whether you're someone who is leading a project, whatever it might look like, how we can make decisions with emotional intelligence in our workplaces. And again, this flow chart will be in the PDF. So let's wrap this up. Just to kind of bring everything together, emotional intelligence is a lifelong skill that improves both personal and professional success. Sorry, excuse me. It is a skill that personal and professional success. We want to make sure that we are practicing these skills daily. We want to be aware of our self-awareness, our self-management, our ability to regulate our emotions, our ability to be empathetic rather than sympathetic. And we want to be practicing those things that can help bring self-awareness into our lives. Things like being able to reflect upon situations, being able to take that pause before we react to something. So we want to be proactive rather than reactive. And most importantly, we want to remember that emotional intelligence is a skill that anyone can learn, and that it is something that it can be improved on. So even if you have those days where it just doesn't go well, tomorrow's a new day. We can start over and we can apply it in any situation. So I thank you for spending time with me today as we work through a brand new presentation. I do include the references for the sources that I used in case anyone ever wants to research this a bit more on their own. But again, I thank you for having me here. We have a couple of more minutes together. I'm available for questions, or if everyone wants to log off and start their lunch or whatever a few minutes early, I am good with that too.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Carly. And yes, as you mentioned earlier, I can reach out to everybody and send out the slides as well following today's session. But yeah, would like to open up the floor to questions. If everyone, please feel free to use the chat or the Q&A function if they would like to ask something. We'll hang out here for a few minutes. Yeah, I personally, like I mentioned in the chat, I really like that flow chart. I think that'd be like a nice thing just to have on the wall to like kind of process uh, emotional regulation. I feel like that would be a really nice reminder. Awesome handout.
Flow charts are good.
Yeah, it's like, yep, which way did the arrows go? And okay.
Is there classes to take to help with practicing these skills? Oh, that's a good question. I'm sure there are. I'm thinking LinkedIn Learning, which used to be lynda.com, would probably be a really good starting point to look for classes on emotional intelligence. Yeah, I'll actually look that up. And if I find any, I'll let Sebastian know, and you can share out with other people too. I'll try to look those up this afternoon and see if I can find any.
Thanks, Carly.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah. If it doesn't seem like there are going to be any more questions, I think we can give everyone back the gift of time and end a little bit early today. Thank you again so much, Carly, for presenting today and sharing all of your wonderful new knowledge and updated new presentation with us. And thank you everybody else also for joining during your lunch hour. I hope everybody has a wonderful Monday.
Yeah. Have a great day, everyone.